Hello and welcome to the Holistic Psychiatrist podcast, where we are building well-being from the thought up and creating miraculous healing journeys. I'm your host, Dr. Alice Lee, the Holistic Psychiatrist, practicing in Utah, New York. Today, I'm happy to introduce my guest, Dr. Tomi Mitchell. She's the go-to MD coach. She's an entrepreneur, a physician, and a mental health and wellness coach. She's a bold, innovative, passionate, highly intelligent, and energetic woman. She empowers executives, leaders, physicians, lawyers, and other professionals to reduce burnout and overwhelm so that they can increase productivity in the workplace and in their lives. She has been practicing family medicine since 2011, both inpatient and outpatient. When you're feeling burned out and no longer sure of your purpose, when you're struggling with stress, anxiety, low self-esteem, and overwhelm, but you're still putting up a front that you have it all together, when you're trying too hard to be the perfect parent, spouse, professional, when you're tired of trying to figure out how to be your, quote, best self, unquote, Dr. Tomi Mitchell is here to help. The purpose of our podcast today is to learn more about Dr. Mitchell's new book, and it's got a long title. It's called The Soul-Sucking, Energy-Draining Life of a Physician, How to Live a Life of Service Without Losing Yourself. Today, we will talk about aspects of work that cause burnout among so many physicians and other professionals in stressful careers. Over the years, Dr. Mitchell has learned how to identify and address these work-related hazards in order to shield people from their negative effects and to help them create thriving lives. Listen to this amazing podcast that allows common sense, wisdom, and humor to help you avoid the emotional and psychological pitfalls found at work. So thank you so much, Dr. Tomi Mitchell, for coming to this podcast and sharing your wisdom and your insights in your new book that's about to come out soon. I'm so glad that you are here and that you've agreed to be on my podcast.
Well, it's my pleasure, Dr. Lee. It's great being here. I'm excited to have this conversation with you and our listeners.
Yes, it's wonderful to have you here. And I reached out to you when I saw your article on LinkedIn. I really liked your article about aspects of physicians' work can be so draining for them. And I reached out to you because I wanted you to be on my podcast. And it's been several months since I reached out to you, and I've been really enjoying our ongoing kind of relationship where I've learned so much about you and you've learned so much about me, discovered that we're very similar in terms of our mindset and our goals. So it's been really a delight to have you support in my life and also as a friend and mentor. So thank you so much.
Yes, Dr. Alice, the feelings are mutual. You're like, or I'm your mini me, or I'm whichever one. We're like two peas in the pod. It's quite funny. Very similar way of thinking.
All right. Well, let's start by having the audience hear a little bit about you and your background, and then we can get started by learning about you, and then we can talk about your book.
Yes. Well, almost 20 years this year, I started medical school. And a few months in, I remember doing the white coat ceremony, all excited, gung-ho, medicine, here I go. A dream come true. I had, given my soul to medicine. I was like, bargained with God, let me get in, because it was hard, being one of the few, quote unquote, chosen to get in. The reality, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know the profound impact that this journey would have on my life. A little bit about me. Like I said, I'm a physician. I am a family doctor, and I've been practicing for over a decade. And in that decade, I practiced like a crazy lady. I always believed in go big, go home. So in that decade plus, as people have told me, I probably put in 30 years of practice experience. So though I'm relatively youngish, I've seen a lot. And that has to do with my upbringing, right? Immigrant parents. I was told to work hard. I took that to heart, maybe too far. Hence, I got burnt out. And somewhere along the journey, I recognized where I was, burnt out, frustrated. And I had to pause for the first time in my life. Like I started school at age 4. I didn't stop. I did school in the summer. I worked. I studied. Like it didn't end until I literally crashed and burned. Not physically burnt, but I mean mentally, emotionally, physically, I was done. And I had to take a break from my busy medical center that I was running and organizing. So that's me in a nutshell, but I'm sure we'll talk more about it in our conversation.
Wow. As you're talking about that, I just think about my very similar journey where I wanted to go into medical school. It was very difficult to get in. I think that I had in mind a certain kind of experience that I was going to be taught how to really help people. And I encountered something really interesting during that process. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So what motivated you to write this book?
Making sense of my experience. Now, before that point, I always wanted to write a book. I think stats show like at least 67% of people want to write a book, but like not even 2% actually do, right?
Yeah.
But it's a goal that many of us have. Well, I did. And it was birthed from my experiences and trying to make sense of it and get it off my chest. And what other way than to write a book that really you can share your voice instead of someone else speaking for you? Because in this career, sometimes people speak for us and it's not what we believe in or it's not what we stand. It's just the nature of this soul sucking career that we walked into naively. And my goal is to really open the eyes of would be doctors, those who are contemplating doctors, those who are perhaps married into medicine, who have spouses that are doctors, and those who, most importantly, those of us who are already in this game, because it's a real commitment. It can change your life completely. And if you're not careful, it can drain the life from you.
Yeah, I found that my medical school training and maybe even to some extent my residency was so intense with study that it went by in a blur. I don't remember much during that period of time other than just studying and maybe eating a little bit and sleeping a little bit.
Yes.
And anything that happened outside of my circle of, medical school just kind of went by me. I hardly ever, I think, ever went out to see a movie. I didn't listen to much music. I think whatever happened to my family during that time kind of went by and can't even remember. So the studying during medical school, I think, was to me very intense. I don't have what some people may have, like a photographic memory. So it takes a long time for me to let that material sink in.
Yeah. It was a marathon, an extreme triathlon, like grueling. I remember studying for exams and literally staying up till sunrise to like sleep for like 40 minutes maybe, and then shower and get ready to class. And then residency, talk about sleep deprivation. And in my case, even as an attending, it was like more because of the where I was working at that point, it was like residency. It was like 24/7 call, weeks and months, and at one point years on end. Like it was insane when I look back what I can remember.
But also I think narcissistic, because medicine's very narcissistic.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
It's like everybody else is human, but we don't need to eat, sleep, or, have relationships.
That is so true. We are treated totally different standard. It's inhumane. The expectations are realistic. And God forbid you're not the golden child of the narcissistic relationship and you have a life situation or something that, maybe someone dies in your family. Maybe you're ill and you can't keep up with your commitment. The ultimatums you'll receive in training, it's ridiculous. And even just talking about it, I'm like, memories come to my mind. I think we repressed a lot of them because they were so hurtful, but we didn't really know how to process it. We didn't realize just how bad it was until we're out and we're free from the oppressor. So we're like, okay, we can at least talk about it more and hopefully help other people. But it's a real thing. It's very narcissistic.
There's a lot of, there's a lot of it that's kind of like brainwashing, don't you think?
100%. And let's be real. Who do these top careers, whether it's lawyers or doctors, who do they really attract? Okay. You have a concentration of individuals who typically are very type A, very black and white, right? In that system. And then there's me, who's there's gray, there's pink, there's fuchsia. But this is a very black and white system. But we're dealing with humans. Humans aren't black and white.
Yeah. Well, I think my next question you've already answered, which is, what do you mean by soul sucking? But I wondered if you wanted to go further into things that we may have not discussed. That is, in your opinion, kind of why you chose that word soul sucking.
Yeah, because it impacts your deepest core. I'm sure you did the same thing. You mentioned it. You wanted to go into medicine to help people. But this system that you go into is not designed to truly help people. It's designed to put a band-aid and keep them sick and coming back to the source for whatever. It's not designed to make people whole. And that's, to me, it's soul sucking because that's not what I signed up for. That's not what they teach us, in quote. And then in reality, that's not what's actually happening. So there's a problem. And soul sucking, not only that, it also impacts your own personal life. Like there's a war between professional obligations and your personal obligations as a human being, and also as a human being who's also a patient, because we all are patients, because we all have bodies, right? So like, where do we come in the picture? Like, yeah, so it's soul sucking is it just takes something from you. And if you're not careful, it can take your joy, that happiness, that fountain, and replace it with, I hate this job. I don't like my life. What the hell am I doing?
And it actually doesn't really matter at some point whether you're really that busy or not. Because I remember I got to a place where I had a nice, solo private practice. Things were settled. I knew what to do as a regular psychiatrist, and things had kind of like a certain rhythm to it.
Yes.
And in solo private practice, you don't have to be too busy. You can work the number of hours you want to work.
Yes.
But I remember every time I went to the grocery store, I would look at the grocery baggers and I would like, oh, how I wish I was a grocery bagger. Because I just couldn't. There was something about the job that didn't fit my energy. And it wasn't until I got into more of a holistic approach where I'm really helping people heal and stop being patients that I felt more rewarded.
Yes.
But routine of putting people on medication and seeing that they're doing better, but they're all kind of always coming back for the medication and the ongoing treatment, to me was not at the subconscious level. I knew it wasn't what I was looking for.
Exactly. That's weighing on your soul, like that spirit, that inside of you, that conscience. That's like, this is why if they're better, why are they coming back for this crack in a bottle?
Yeah.
Whether it's whatever drug. Why?
Exactly.
Why are we doing this?
Actually, talking about crack in a bottle, I did have for a time, I paid for a training program for psychiatrists, and it was just audio training programs where you can get CMEs. And the person was recommending stimulants that were basically like crack.
Right.
And I was like, oh, okay, I'll try that. He says it's good. It's this audio training program, but it wasn't. I remember it was an amphetamine that was methamphetamine, and that's meth.
Right.
And he was saying that was better. And so sometimes, you get this training that is supposed to, validate treatments that really are hurtful. And if you are too gullible and you think everything that, is giving you CME is the right advice, you end up giving a lot of medications that are very addicting and very harmful. And
100%.
it was being given to children,
That's the scary dark side of medicine. Like you're trained one way and then you go on that path. And then at some point you're like, this isn't working. Right. And hopefully the patient has access to the resources and systems to help them get on the light, to see the light. I would say head to the right, but if they don't, it's like that moral injury. It's like, I want to help you over here, but they don't have the resources. There's a barrier. And it's like, no. And it's icky, right?
Yeah. In fact, today I was, for some reason, just randomly looking online on some articles, and I happened upon an article that said in the past, in America, what they gave babies to kind of settle them down and help them was actually alcohol and a mix of alcohol and opium.
Yeah, that's where modern medicine has come from. Like,
I know.
Yeah, we
sometimes,
Band-Aid.
laugh at the past, but then, in another 100 years, they'll look at us and laugh at what we did.
Oh,
right?
100%. 100%. But I'm hoping in 100 years, the world has caught on to this truly holistic, transformative way of doing wellness, like not sick care, like well care. We're talking about optimizing health and biohacking and energy and all this like whole person medicine, where prescriptions is a very small part of that. Maybe it's just to stabilize somebody temporarily. Maybe, but not what we're doing right now.
Yeah. In a way, though, I think the social system will have to change very drastically, because I think that what motivates medicine is really monetary, like profit.
Oh, 100%. It's yes. How do you put a price tag on something that is free for everybody?
Yes.
That's very hard. Yes. But people are very creative. I'm sure somebody will figure out something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Here's another question.
Yeah.
How do various jobs create burnout, and why are they soul sucking? So let's talk about these jobs and what it is. What do they have in common?
Yes, they have unrealistic expectations, where the person is placed in a situation where they have chronic stress with reoccurring acute crises. Bam, 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 bam. Doing that for months or a long period of time is exhausting. And it's no surprise that, a few years ago, burnout became the big buzzword because people finally realized, they had their chronic stress from being a doctor, healthcare provider, and then a major global crisis happened that profoundly impacted their way of working, their identity, their everything. And it just broke the camel's back. So if you have loss of autonomy, where you're supposed to be the physician who is trained and educated, but pencil pushers who have no medical knowledge are making decisions that impact your clinical care, and they're like, you need to do a better job, but they're making the system that is twisted. That is exhausting. That's like, what the hell is this? But that's what happens every single day across this country. People who have no business in medicine are making decisions that impact patient care, and the doctor, physician has to sign off on it. Right?
We're
and
the
take
one
the
responsible
liability
for it. Yes.
Exactly. You are going to take the liability because you're going to sign, you're going to put your signature on it.
Well, it takes advantage of doctors who are very generally compliant.
Yes.
By then we've been brainwashed to do everything that we're supposed to and do it perfectly. And we don't, by then, most doctors can't say no. Or in fact, they don't even say they don't know. They just, do what they're told by then.
They do because they have been their jobs in the line. They know that if they don't do this, they're going to lose their job and they're going to be blacklisted from other jobs, their livelihood, their families, all the responsibilities they have, their $250,000 medical school debt, which is something I talk about in that book, right? Is still on their shoulder, and they're like 35 years old, and, God forbid they want to settle down and have a family, right? So it's real.
So these jobs all have really unrealistic expectations, and
100%.
It takes people who think that they can do it, and then they do it year after year. That causes the ultimate burnout because they're agreeing with the story.
Yes. I give my example. I think I mentioned in the book, but that was me, very agreeable, very compliant, very obedient. I was told to do what I do it. But I worked in a place where, as a family physician, we had to be on call for our patients 24/7, where it was considered unethical or unprofessional to tell them to go to the emergency after hours, where you had to be there for them day and night. Now, try to do that. Is that realistic? No, but that was a system that thousands of doctors were placed under. And we did it until you stop back and pause. Either you burn out, crash and burn, get sick, go crazy, or run away, which I did kind of all the above. I didn't really go crazy. I was still lucid, but it was exhausting. I was like, no, sometimes you will be in a system that is so toxic. You actually have to leave. You can't fix that one.
Right.
It's not worth it. There is no job out there that is worth sacrificing your physical and mental health for. There is none. Because they will replace you. But the person who can't be replaced is the parent, the mother, the friend, you as a person. So doctors, you're human too. Even though they tell us we are kind of, but in reality, they don't act that way. But you are human and you matter, and you're more than just a doctor.
Well, I think some of the temptations, I guess, with regard to staying stuck in the system is that there are certain perks to having that MD or the doctor.
Yes.
Because you go into a party, you go into a group and you say, yeah, I'm a physician, and people just make assumptions about you.
Oh, yes.
Let's talk about that.
There's those perks. It's like that addictive drug. It's those, they say this, banks love me, money, this and that. But that's, you also have to be careful. They're a double-edged sword. They may seem positive initially, but if you're not careful, it can have the opposite effect. But yeah, there are definitely perks, but is it real? Is it really worth if you're feeling like if you're truly going through a soul-sucking and draining experience? Now, don't get me wrong. Some doctors enjoying their practice, like they couldn't be happy. And where I am right now, I'm very happy when it comes to my work. I'm not complaining, but I'm saying I have been in situations where it was the opposite. And my encouragement is don't stay there, because you should not carry the weight on your shoulders, a dysfunctional system that is not your responsibility, or toxic leaders in that system, because that's another issue. Sometimes leadership is toxic.
It's interesting because I'm also in the same situation as you, in the sense that I have at this point created a little, island paradise
Yeah.
for my
Right?
work, which I work with like amazing patients. I love
Yes.
them. I'm able to help them to get better in a very profound way and in a way that feels really rewarding and fulfilling.
Yes.
My patients that I get to work with, when I'm working with them, I have these joyful moments where I'm just very grateful that I am able to work with them. And it's just a delightful reciprocal relationship. So it's taken a long, long time for me to find my little haven in terms
Right?
of where I can really help people, but also, nurture myself. And I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about number one, what are some ways to avoid getting stuck in soul sucking jobs? But also, how do we create thriving work situations for ourselves when the whole, social system is creating very stressful, situations for doctors and
Yes.
professionals? Mm-hmm.
Really good question. So, how not to get in soul sucking jobs? Well, number one, you have to do your homework before you sign a contract or you start a job.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you have to figure out why do people stay and why did they go,
Mm-hmm.
right? Sometimes you're walking literally into a lion's den and
Mm-hmm.
you have to do some homework, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's one, more of an extreme case. Another one is from the beginning, have realistic expectations and boundaries. Now, in my practice, I didn't in the beginning. I took on every person who needed me, every sob story. I was there, you know, what lunch break, what I'll be there at 8 o'clock, I'll be there Christmas Day. Like I just there, helping people, but at what expense? Because
Mm-hmm.
if you continue to give, when crisis hits you, you'll have no reserve and you will crash and burn, right? And that's like what happens to me. And I'm sure it's happened to many physicians when stuff goes on in the rest of their life. God forbid it's your personal life, whether it's yourself or with work or the society as a large, right? And that's one. You must have a life outside of medicine. I think so many doctors, all they do is talk about medicine. Like they have no life, no hobbies. Like they don't do anything fun. And part of it's because they never really found themselves because medicine was their identity, because you were brainwashed to work hard, pass your MCAT, pass this, get into school, like medicine, study, boards, scores, percentiles. Like their whole life was focused on this. And then they don't remember when last they did something fun or creative, played guitar, played piano, wrote a poem, did something, like jumped in the ocean. I don't care, something. And like, I was there. I remember one day thinking to myself, working in the summer, Saturday, I'm working in my office, like 4 in the afternoon. And I'm like looking out the window, the sun is shining. I'm like, I don't remember the last time I had a weekend off. Or when last did I sit on my deck and read a book? I couldn't even remember. It was
Yeah.
like before medical school. All my
Yeah.
reading had been textbooks or journals. Like,
Because
what?
we are rewarded for being on top of things. And
Well,
so
yeah,
we
you
want,
rewarded
we
and
don't want to
you're
be the dumb one
influenced.
in the room, right?
No, God forbid. You need to be on top of it. And also you have all those CME credits and everything you're
Oh,
supposed to
yeah.
do. So
Mm-hmm.
there's expectations to be on top of everything. And medicine, spoiler alert, is like a living career. Drugs, medicine, diagnosis, expectations, therapies are constantly changing. The things they taught me 20 years ago when I started medical school, I don't know if half that stuff is even relevant. Like, I look at diabetes and I'm like, maybe 2 of those classes we still use, but now there's like a whole schwack load, right? Things have changed. Society have changed. People have become more complex in their health. We're having more chronic illness where there's just so much and we have to stay on top of it. So you have to basically be a lifelong learner.
Yeah.
Otherwise you become a dinosaur.
This whole thing about, trying to spend time outside of work to develop yourself. I mean, I think in medicine, it's such a greedy kind of profession that it will suck every second that you have and every second that doesn't belong to it. Like all them,
100%.
all the time that you should be spending being a parent to young kids or,
Mm-mm.
being a spouse or, taking care of yourself. God forbid that you would
God forbid.
take time to
Oh,
take
God
care of
forbid.
yourself. Like medicine would want every second of it and not feel guilty about it because they think that they're entitled to that from your
Yes.
life
Yes.
until you're so burned out that you can't function anymore. Then it's going to like attack you for not functioning well,
Right?
spit you out
And
and go on
yes.
into the next person, like next.
Yes, that is so true. Because, like, I remember when I had my first child, I was doing office work while in labor. Like before, like obviously it was like super bad, but I was like ordering supplies on the phone. Like I was doing
Wow.
work, and even
Oh
after
my
other
goodness.
surgeries I've had, I'm like, I was signing, like I was like, it's not normal.
No.
But that's what we do. Because guess what? It doesn't matter if you are in labor or whatever. If you have a lab result that came in with your name on it, even if the person did it months after they were supposed to, when you were supposed to be on vacation, if that existed, or in labor, you are still responsible for it unless you found somebody to cover you. But still, you are still ultimately responsible for. So there's so many variables. You can try put your ducks in a row and then something T-bone done. Like, but you are responsible for it. That is
It's funny
medicine.
because they train you very early to do that, because I remember my very first rotation was in cardiology and I got sick and I had to stay home. I was really very ill and I was in this apartment. I was trying to rest and a knock comes to my apartment door. Some girl from the cardiology, like some intern or whatever, some lady with a pile of cardiology ECGs, that I had to read and interpret while I was sick.
That's what I'm saying.
And it was like, here you go do your work. You know what I should have done? I should have just given it back to her and said, I'm sick. I'm taking sick leave. You do your work, like take it back to the cardiologist who can do it by himself. Why should I be doing it?
Right. But you didn't say that because you're bound by this crazy obligation. Any other person in a C-level job out there or a professional, they'll be like, oh, it's my sick day off. It's my time. Don't call me. It's 5:01. Don't call me. Like they can do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
No, you can't. Unless you are no longer breathing or you're the golden child. You can be there's the golden child out there. But if you're just regular, if you're still breathing, it is your obligation. Actually, your obligation still continues after death. Because when you own a practice and have medical records, someone has to look after that sometime. So it's after death. Like, oh my goodness. That's why people don't own a practice as much as you can. Avoid being the chief custodian of records.
Well, okay. So we've talked quite a bit about how we can recognize when someone or something is soul sucking.
Yes.
Now, okay, you recognize it. Let's say you can afford to avoid it. So how do we go beyond like just avoiding that? Is there some things that we need to start doing to help our lives to recover?
100%. So there's I call it the 3 E's, and I have them in the book. So it's energize, evaluate, and embrace. Now break it down briefly. So usually in life, we put a Band-Aid in situations or duct tape. It's like, okay, out of sight, out of mind. We'll just do this temporary. It'll be temporary. Then suddenly the temporary fix becomes a long-term solution. That's what happens a lot in life. We have to actually stop and like, okay, let's do something different. So I guess the first one is embrace. Embrace, I said it backwards. Embrace the past, present, and future. You have to understand why you got in this situation in the first place. Like I had to understand why I burnt out significantly and others didn't burn out quite as much. Well, number one, if you were raised to believe you must work 10 times harder than your peers before you would be considered to be good, just good, what does it do to you? You're always proving yourself. You take on more than you humanly should. And I did that. Like, who is on call for months or years on end every single day? Where you literally have your phone with you all the time. Who has a practice of 6,500 patients? That's crazy. I did that.
Oh, wow.
Right? When people disappear, guess what? As the owner, there's orphan patients. You just take them on, right? So embrace. Why are you doing this? What's in your past that's making you more prone? Because some people, it's like they're like glue. They attract stuff and there's a reason more, like there can be a reason. And then you got to realize what you want for the future and be realistic in your expectations. Okay. The next thing is evaluate. As physicians, we are taught to, and we should not lose this skill because I see it's often getting eroded in medicine. The ability to look deep, the root causes, not just the surface level. Like I think back in medical school, there's this vascular mnemonic where we have to look at all the reasons for why things happen. Like we need to go back and do that in our lives. But look at ourselves. What are those factors that's contributing to this? Perhaps you're like the oldest child who's looking after aged parents and you're financially responsible for them and bringing the rest of your family from God knows where. Well, that's a lot of pressure, right? You wouldn't make time for yourself because you have the weight of the world on you, right? Perhaps you are, you're trying to run away from something, past experience, past hurt. Prove yourself. Perhaps you've been burnt in the past and you figure you need to prove yourself. Like, you have to really look deep, the why beneath the why beneath the why. You have to dissect the problem, because if you don't, you're not going to find a long lasting, sustainable solution. So that's that. And then finally, this is a step that many of us skip, which is kind of important, where we have accountability and systems in place to stay on track. After you've figured out what went wrong, why, what are the reasons it went wrong, how are you going to stay on track so you don't go there again? Because you're already in this situation where you're burnt out. You're literally like crispy. Okay. You need to back away and be like, what went wrong? Because clearly many things went wrong, right? So that's what I recommend. So embrace the past, the present, and the future. You can't avoid the past. A lot of people put things in the back burner, and like I say, you can't do for so long, or they throw things under the rug. They shove it under the rug. And I'm like, you can do that for as long as you can, but eventually you're going to trip over it. Clearly you're tripping. So what is it under the rug that you need to bring out, right? And we have to ask ourselves, somewhere along that journey, we kind of ignored feelings, ignored thoughts, ignored red flags, didn't even know to look for red flags. We just went ahead because guess what? We're doctors. We're to save people and help people. And, we signed this, we swore this oath, right? We got to do all this. We got to train residents, train students, be superwomen, give to the poor, be like Robin Hood. Well, not quite Robin Hood, but I mean, give free samples to patients who can't afford their drugs from the medicine cabinet. But we have to ask ourselves what went wrong, because too often the solutions are very band-aid approach. And that's why I challenge my readers, my listeners, to stop, pause, and think. Because in my life, I had to take a leave off work where I literally paused, literally stopped, because I couldn't stand the sound of Dr. Mitchell, walking into your office and it's like, hey, Dr. Mitchell, this person needs you. No. Right?
As you were talking, there were two things that I wanted to talk about. One is how in the process of our training, medicine twists and manipulates and takes advantage of our innate compassion.
Yes.
So it becomes our enemy rather than a really beautiful part of our personalities. And the second one is how medicine or many demanding professions teach us not to say no. We're already, very compliant and giving people. We want to give, we want to help, but it also, like in many societal systems, they take advantage of these good traits and they use it for profit. So
100%.
If you never say no, you will always be there. And if you're like this person that was coming into this field being full of compassion, if you will never say no to anybody who comes to you asking for help, and the burden goes up, yes, and you still have this compassion to help people, and you don't know when to say no. Let's talk about those two things, because I think that those two characteristics need to be evaluated and say, where's the balance for the compassion? When do we need to say no?
Yes, I really like that question, because honestly, there needs to be balance, because I think empathy, kindness, caring is something that patients need it. These hands, physicians are supposed to be healing hands. Our presence, just walking into the room, talking to the patient, making eye contact, listening to them with open heart is important.
And that's why it can be soul sucking, because
exactly
we give so much of our heart into everybody.
Yes,
right?
Exactly. And when you open your heart, it's open so people can take. It's two-way. Right. There's not a valve. It's two-way, right? But we need to create a boundary, right? Where we, yes, you talk to the patient. Yes, you have a time frame where you can talk to them. You do your best. And as physicians, sometimes we have to learn to say, okay, we're going to pause here. Let's reconvene. Let's connect in 2 weeks. Does this date work with you? Talk to the front desk. We have to have realistic expectations, because guess what? You could do everything you're supposed to do according to standard of care, etc., etc. But if something happens and the patient doesn't take their medication, and they don't tell you don't take it, they fill it, but they don't take it. Because people are good at that. They'll fill in medication, but sure as hell I'm going to take it. And then you're like, what's happening? Or you say, okay, What about lifestyle modifications? Because that's in family medicine. Most of the challenges we experience are due to our lifestyle. It's like food is medicine, people. Food really is. Eat a rainbow. Move. I'm not saying go to the gym, but you need to move. And if you don't measure something, how do you know if you're doing it or not? So I encourage patients to get a device that tracks their movement. Like move, like eat vegetables. Anyway, that's another story. But it's like, there's only so much we can do. And we have to come to terms with that. And if you're in a system where patients have limited resources, and that's challenging, where you're having to fight with insurance companies for payment so patients can get a needed screening like mammo because their mother had breast cancer at 45 and they're like 35 and they're like, please. And insurance is like, you're too young or no. It's hard. But again, you have to know the system you're working in because it's not like that in every place across the country, across the world. So you have to manage your expectations and communicate that with your patients. And we've heard it 1,000 times, document till you have thoracic outlet syndrome, which I ended up with, or carpal tunnel. Document. But you have to, because there's only so much you can do. And you just need to understand that. And the no can be a complete sentence. Obviously, when you're a student or a resident, you don't really say no a lot because that could mean like problems in your training. But there's a way in which you can say no with grace. You just add some fluff, right? And you build and you let them, and people get to know that when you are there, you give 100%. You are kind. You are like the resident that they want to have. Like you're like the one who is diligent and you're nice. Like you're nice to the nurses. You're nice to the support staff. You're nice to the porters. You're nice with boundaries with everyone. Then it makes it a lot easier to say no, but with all the extra fluff.
Well, here's another thing that I find interesting, and I've observed it in myself, and that is when we push ourselves that hard and we expect, this perfection from ourselves.
Yes.
It's inevitable that it kind of bleeds into our work with our patients.
Yes.
And I think that this, one step at a time, having, reasonable expectations wasn't something that I realized I wasn't doing very well with my patients, because in a way I thought I was being reasonable, but I had been so brainwashed into thinking that the unreasonable is reasonable from my medical training that in a way I kind of almost expected like huge leaps in healing and a lot of, improvements and all this stuff. And they had to reach a certain perfect goal or else I'm a failure. And therefore, it didn't work. Over the years, I found that sometimes patients will write a little letter back and thank me for my work that I've done for them. And I would literally think to myself, wow, I don't think I did anything in that case. But sometimes, like in my life, I think that we expect so much of ourselves that the improvements, even though we think it's small in other people, can be very profound. And we don't understand that concept.
Yes, that's so true. That reminds me of a book that wasn't around when I was in medical school, Atomic Habits by James Clear. And it's me too. Those small little steps and they compound over time, like interest in the bank. You might think I'm just putting away a few $100s a month, but then by the time you're 65, it's like, holy crap, I got $1 million. Those little steps make a big difference with the right systems in place, right? It's all about habits, systems, like it's those little things. So we may think to ourselves, oh, it's not much. It's not like I ran a marathon. It's not like I did all this. But guess what? To that patient that you connected to, you were there for them. You encouraged them in a professional, empathetic way with healthy boundaries. That meant the world to them because guess what? They've never met a person like you. They've never met a doctor like you, and you made the world a difference. And, when a lot of our feedback is all numbers. Oh, her oxygen level is this. Oh, hemoglobin is this, or this is this. How about feedback that you can't put a number on it? There's no blood test for how you made someone feel or the quality of their life, so per se. But that's where we're going from this like black and white numbers idea to like there's gray, to there's feelings, to there's function, to there's how's the patient integrating the rest of their lives. The whole person. How are they showing up in their personal life with their friends or family, like at work? The bigger picture.
Very good. Yeah, lots of good advice, and I really enjoyed all the things that we've covered today. I wanted to mention that we are planning to have another podcast together in a few weeks. And we're going to talk about your own kind of perspective on this burnout triad concept and how you differ in terms of that concept and why you might differ. So the burnout triad is emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and sense of decreased personal accomplishment. That's the burnout triad. And we're going to talk about this particular, triad from Dr. Tomi Mitchell's perspective. And I'm really looking forward to, learning more about what her personal perspective is on that. Do you want to say something before we finish our podcast on this upcoming one?
Yes, this is not one you want to miss, because this will be an eye opener to you and it will make you pause and realize that things are going to be okay, but things need to change. And it's also addressing the elephant in the room. And that's what we're going to do. Okay. So I look forward to that conversation, Dr. Lee.
Oh, that'll be great. Any final advice for those who are currently stuck in soul-sucking jobs?
Well, it doesn't have to be this way. Definitely have to listen to part 2 of this to understand how the rest of how to fix it. Because what I told you is great, but it's deeper than that. We got to discuss the elephant in the room. But if you're willing to do the work, it doesn't have to be this way. And you got to be willing to let go of the way you see and view yourself. Sometimes we tire jobs like, oh yeah, you're the professor of this, you're the clinical director of this. Well, maybe that is not the best situation for you. Maybe everyone who did that job, they either died of a coronary heart attack at 50, or their life was hell, or they never saw their kids and their kids hate them. So maybe that's not for you. Maybe you have to find fulfillment in another way. And that's all.
Sometimes we have to give up certain perks that make us sick, in order for us to take the real perks that make us thrive, right? Yeah, wonderful. Okay. So I hope that you've enjoyed our podcast today. We're going to finish up today, and just wanted to emphasize a couple of bullet points that I thought was really very helpful. I think that one of the things that we haven't talked about is that, today's podcast is really brought to you by 2 physicians who really went through it. Yes. And we found ways to kind of deal with it. Yes. So you're coming from people who know how it felt to be in a soul-sucking job and who found ways to overcome it. And the other thing that I think is very helpful for us to remember is to look for Dr. Tomi's new book that's coming out. It's called The Soul-Sucking, Energy Draining Life of a Physician, How to Live a Life of Service Without Losing Yourself. So I want all of you to kind of keep an eye out for that when it comes out. For those of you who want to have access to our bio and all the information about us, you can find Dr. Mitchell's information under holisticwellnessstrategies.com. And if you want to learn more about me, I'm at holisticspsychiatrist.com. I told you that Dr. Mitchell and I are we're like one person.
Oh, yeah, for real.
We like the holistic word, holistic. Please feel free to, comment on the podcast, contact us whenever we contact us on our websites if you need to ask questions. Please leave positive comments on our podcast if you liked it. If you've enjoyed today's content, please subscribe to this podcast for more informative insights on holistic psychiatry. And also, if you have not done so already, please subscribe to my holistic articles on my website, holisticspsychiatrist.com, for wonderful stories and developments from my holistic practice, and where you'll find links to all my social media platforms. For those who want to access professional grade supplements, you can register for Full Script's online dispensary on my website under the products tab. And Full Script is a nutritional supplement dispensary where you will find the industry's largest catalog of high quality nutritional supplements from trustworthy companies. Until next time, let's keep building our well-being from the thought up and have a wonderful, joyful week. Thank you once again, Dr. Tomi Mitchell, for being on my podcast. I look forward to having our audience join us next time. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.